Today I want to show you that there are certain patterns within Jesus' speech that point to the fact that his teachings within the four Gospels all stem from the same mind. Let's get into it. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is going to be an example of the argument from artless similarities, which works within a cumulative case for showing the historical reliability of the Gospels. And for those of you unfamiliar with the term, an artless similarity refers to the casual consistency with which a character is portrayed across different episodes involving the character, especially when compared between multiple authors. I'm going to give you a few examples to show you how this works. I want to say a lot of my examples for today's video are coming from this book, The Surprising Genius of Jesus by Peter J. Williams. I'll put a link in the description. I highly recommend checking this book out. It was really, really good. Matthew 12 says, "The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here." And in Luke 11 it says, "The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here." The pattern in the speech here is unmistakable. There's a discussion about the rising up and the judgment of that current generation, and then behold, someone greater than X is here. In Matthew 13 it says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches." And in Luke 13 it says, "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour, till it was all leavened." Again, the pattern is unmistakable. The kingdom of heaven is like something small that begins to grow and grow over time. Matthew 24 says, "Then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and one left." And in Luke 17, "I tell you, in the night there will be 2 in one bed. One will be taken away and the other left. There will be 2 women grinding at the same place, and one will be taken and the other left." There are a couple of patterns here that are worth mentioning. There's the shift from male to female in both sayings, and we see the 2 being in one place, one being left behind, and the other being taken up. Matthew 12, 9-13 says, "Departing from there, he went into their synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was withered. And they questioned Jesus, asking, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?' So they might bring charges against him. But he said to them, 'What man is there among you who has a sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will he not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable then is a person than a sheep? So then, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath.' Then he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He stretched it out, and it was restored to normal, like the other." There are 4 things I want to point out about this particular pericope. 1, Jesus is being questioned about whether we can heal on the Sabbath by religious leaders. 2, he teaches that if a sheep falls into a pit on the Sabbath, they would lift it out. 3, Jesus heals the man despite it being the Sabbath. And I want to note the logical structure of the teaching is that humans are more valuable than animals. So if you would help an animal on the Sabbath, you should also help a human. Let's look at a similar passage in Luke 13 that is in a completely different context. "Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and there was a woman who for 18 years had had a sickness caused by a spirit, and she was bent over double, and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called over and said to her, 'Woman, you are freed from your sickness.' And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she stood up straight again and began glorifying God. But the synagogue leader, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, began saying to the crowd in response, 'There are 6 days during which work should be done, so come during them and get healed, and not on the Sabbath day.' But the Lord answered him and said, 'You hypocrites, does each one of you on the Sabbath not untie his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it away to water it? And this woman, a daughter of Abraham as she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years, should she not have been released from this restraint on the Sabbath day?'" So again, we see Jesus being challenged by a religious leader about healing on the Sabbath. He again refers to helping an animal on the Sabbath, this time being an ox or a donkey, and he heals the woman despite it being on the Sabbath. The logical structure, once again, of this teaching is that humans are more valuable than animals. So if you would help an animal on the Sabbath, you should also help a human. So now we need to explain the striking and casual consistency within the teachings of Jesus recorded for us in the Gospels. I want to identify and define 3 alternative explanations and see which one is the best. The first I'm going to call the chance hypothesis. The chance hypothesis would posit that the authors are not recording accurate history, are not colluding together, and therefore wrote independently of one another. But these coincidences within these statements of Jesus exist purely by chance. Second, we have the design hypothesis. The design hypothesis would posit that the authors are not recording accurate history, and the consistencies within these statements of Jesus exist through the authors colluding together in order to make Jesus' statements merely appear historical. And finally, we have the accurate historical reportage hypothesis, which would posit that the gospel authors are intending to record genuine historical statements from Jesus of Nazareth. I've put all of this into a simple syllogism to hopefully make this easy to remember. Premise 1. Artless similarities regarding the teachings of Jesus in the Gospels are best explained by chance, design, or accurate historical reportage. Premise 2. Artless similarities are not best explained by chance or design. Therefore, artless similarities are best explained by accurate historical reportage. In defense of premise 1, unless you can come up with an alternative explanation, this is self-evidently true. So I'm going to spend most of my time defending premise 2. Let's first deal with the chance hypothesis. The similarities are too striking and consistent to reasonably be explained by chance. The statistical probability of such phenomena appearing purely by chance would be so astronomically low that it would be absurd to believe this happened. Let's imagine 2 guys sit down. They decide they're going to write independently of one another an ahistorical account of the same person. Can you really imagine that these 2 men would come up with similarities that are this striking and this consistent? Intuitively, this explanation seems to fall flat on its face. Does the design hypothesis fare any better? How could they be designed if the sayings aren't connected in any meaningful way and the connections exist within unique contexts? Not to mention the very matter-of-fact reporting style of these sayings. The style seems too casual to be designed. The burden of proof would be on the skeptic to provide an explanation for how these sayings were designed to merely appear historical, given we don't have sufficient evidence to posit collusion. I also want to take a moment to mention that both of these hypotheses, the chance and design hypothesis, are ad hoc. We don't have any testimonial or textual evidence for either one. They would merely act as alternative explanations, aimed at rejecting the more obvious conclusion. Absent any good reasons to accept these ad hoc explanations, they are to be rejected as the non-evidentially supported hypotheses that they are. It's also important to point out that one common objection against the Gospels is that the ancient world was very superstitious and would believe basically anything. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. Are the Gospel authors gullible fools that believed a silly story about a man resurrecting? Or are they literary geniuses that crafted these kinds of connections seamlessly within their narratives in order to make them appear to be historical when they really weren't? You need to pick one, skeptics. You can't affirm mutually exclusive claims whenever it's convenient for your worldview. That is an obvious sign of ad hoc reasoning. And the funny thing is, no matter which option you choose, you're going to have problems. If the gospel authors were fools that would believe a silly story about a man resurrecting from the dead when that in fact did not happen, then you're going to make the design hypothesis even more improbable, because how could they so intricately weave these narratives together in such a way that these historical details would work together so seamlessly when they are so unintelligent that they don't even know that men don't resurrect? But, on the other hand, if they are literary geniuses, you're going to have a really hard time explaining how such geniuses came to genuinely believe a man physically rose from the dead apart from the accurate historical reportage hypothesis. Additionally, we can infer that the gospel authors intended to write history given their literary genre, ancient biography. This would work against the idea that they colluded together to write sophisticated fictional narratives to trick people, which this sort of dishonesty would be entailed by the design hypothesis. It is difficult to account for such subtle consistency by appealing to mere chance, and the casualness of the consistency is evident against it being the result of design. This leaves us with the simplest and best overall explanation. that the gospel writers are providing for us exactly what they claim to all along: testimony regarding history's greatest teacher. Thank you so much for watching this presentation on artless similarities within the teachings of Jesus. I hope it serves within a cumulative case for why the Gospels are substantially reliable eyewitness accounts. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.